There are three of us here today. I'm going to start off with a kind of general overview of the research and some of its principal findings. Then Michael's going to join me in some dialogue around the ideas of ensemble and the importance of theatre in young people's lives. And Juliet is going to be the other part of the sandwich of us authors and talk about the inclusion project and give a flavour of some of the workshop processes that have gone on. It's been a huge honour and privilege to be part of this work over the last 2 years or more. Juliet and I were trying to think back to the beginnings, and they really are now kind of a fair way back. But I think that that's a really important quality of the work. If we're going to share and own ideas about excellence and inclusion, they needed to be slow cooked. They couldn't just be invented and handed out there. They needed to go through the detailed processes of consultation that they've gone through. So we're proud to be part of that, and very proud to see the results of that consultation and how the documents now shape that a little bit. Excellent inclusive youth theatre with that kind of awkward hyphen, because for us, although the project is called Excellence and Inclusion, for us it's always been about excellence with inclusion, and that's kind of captured, if you like, in the brilliant documents, which if I can just about, if you get them like that, you will see that it's one continuous picture between the two documents, which is just our way of symbolising that you can't separate or tease out excellence from inclusion. I just wanted to start though by saying that our key warning in all of this is, in passing these documents over, is to always remember that excellent youth theatre cannot be defined on paper. It can only be lived by each youth theatre and understood through dialogue and participation, in ensuring that there is a shared pride and understanding of what excellence means for all. And I want to talk a little bit about the idea of excellence with inclusion and how it might be different from other understandings and notions of excellence. I think when we were doing the report, James Purnell was still Secretary of State for Culture. I mean, he was there for about a week and then he went off to pensions, which is a great shame really, because I think he understood the kind of values and practices that the youth theatre movement stands for. And he said, the time has come to reclaim the word excellence from its historic elitist undertones and to recognise that the very best art and culture is for everyone, that it has the power to change people's lives, regardless of class, education or ethnicity. And I want to take out the regardless and put because of the strengths, because of the identities of those people who tended to be unrepresented. But of course, as researchers and authors of this document, what we had to do was to try and reclaim an inclusive model of excellence. And that often means reinventing the standards by which excellence is judged. It's quite possible to have excellence which isn't at all inclusive. Excellence which is based on standards of distinction and exclusiveness, which deny people access, opportunity to be considered excellent. So that, for instance, if standards of excellence in ballet exclude those with disabilities or from certain ethnicities, as is the case in England, then those standards have to be challenged and changed. So the challenge of this project has been to work with the youth theatre movement in proposing new standards of excellence and inclusion that are possible for all, but also socially and artistically challenging for all. And we also recognise that in producing these documents with the National Association of Youth Theatre, youth theatre stands at a historical crossroads. Up until this point, NAYT had been an open doors organisation to welcome all comers. But it's now emerging as an organisation whose membership stand in common cause with the NAYT vision, which is to ensure every young person has the opportunity, as a right, to take part in safe, empowering, challenging theatre of excellence. And we go into some detail in the document as to what those words might mean in the context of youth theatres. And certainly in our research, excellence was very important to the young people that we spoke to. And when we asked them to rank different kinds of excellence in youth theatre experience in terms of their importance, the majority stressed that taking part in drama productions and artistic quality were their main reasons for joining. These areas were considered more important than fun, development of personal skills, working environment and confidence building, although many stressed that these different qualities were closely interlinked, but that striving for the highest standards of artistic quality was their defining idea of excellence. And by sharing this vision, the NAYT membership now distinguishes itself from other youth arts organisations with very different and conflicting values and practices. I was in a school in Tamworth last week, and they rent out various spaces in the school, and there were adverts from various groups. There were 2 youth theatre adverts, one for a musical theatre, where the strapline was, "So you want to be a star? Now you can be." And one for a youth theatre, where the strapline was, "Don't fit in, stand out." Well, you know, I think the NAYT take on that might be, you want to take a part in the world and change it? Now you can. Don't fit in, stand together. You know, and I think that is moving to an association that, you know, that has a clear sense of vision, is about making sure that we stand for something so that we don't fall for anything. These are the principles. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but these are the research principles that we work with. You know, I just want to underline the importance of dialogue. We do not go off into rooms and invent these things. You know, we try to get as much dialogue as we could from within individual youth theatres, between youth theatres, between young people, between youth theatre leaders, but also to be mindful of what other bits of policy guidance, advice, best practice was out there in the world that we might capture and adapt and translate into a youth theatre context, rather than trying to identify reinvent the wheel, if you like. So a kind of wide range of work we did in order to put these documents together. And I think that, you know, we were always very mindful and respectful of the way in which the National Association of Youth Theatres has managed autonomy and togetherness. You know, it's been an absolute founding principle of the association that youth theatres are independent, they belong to the young people and leaders who are within them, they grow in their own way, they have their own unique characteristics, but we have a longing to belong and to be together. We don't want to come together to kind of iron out, you know, important and distinctive differences that are there in the movement, and I hope that that's captured in the documents themselves. And I think what's not represented in these principles is something that came across to us very powerfully through all of the research, and that was young people's own concerns about working towards a more inclusive theatre. You know, young people, of all the questions, of all the areas that we asked about, we want to be more inclusive. We want to welcome people into our workshop, which was so, you know, was impressively strong. And I guess my only kind of blue note in all of this is to just remind ourselves that although participation by black and minority ethnic young people in youth theatres is very strong, much stronger than it is in many other areas of youth arts activity and theatre, there is still a considerable underrepresentation of disabled and poor young people. And I think the point about that is that, you know, youth theatres are all over the country, and they're not always in cities and they're not always in multicultural areas, but every area has poor people and disabled people, and it seems to me that, you know, one of the great challenges that young people identify is how do we get more working class and disabled students into our workshops. These again are the visitor methods. This is what we did. We wanted to build on a research tradition of NAYT of using workshops to generate data, to do research with young people, and that was one of the routes that we took here. We also wanted to consult with elders as well as young people. You know, we're aware that there's a very proud 30-year tradition of a movement in movement. You know, a movement that's constantly renewing itself, is always remaining youthful, you know, relatively young audience, and yet there are certain traditions that have been there from the very beginning, which I think, you know, still have a real validity. And yesterday I was at a celebration of the life of Robert Staunton, who organised the first National Festival of Youth Theatres in 1978. And there are traces of his life in this hall that we were looking at, and there was a letter that he wrote to the Leicester Mercury in 1975, where he was defending youth theatre, and he said, "The complex process of putting on a play offers the individuals within it an avenue of clarification and a point of commitment. The demands of performance ensure that the total experience becomes more meaningful than the concerns of individuals." And it seems to me that that remains as true today as it was then, even though the nature, the style, the form of youth theatre will undergo all kinds of changes. You know, hanging on to those things which are foundational and really important, as well as capturing the sense of being in movement, changing in response to the changing needs of new generations, new young members coming in. It seems to me it's very important, and that's what we wanted to try and hold on to. So, findings. First of all, one of the most important findings for us was that research showed that for many young people, an excellent youth theatre is one which offers them friendship and a social life, meaningful social interactions, commitment and solidarity of purpose, performance opportunities, and an opportunity to develop excellent and inclusive standards. That is what they say. And we've translated kind of all of the research and all the findings just into these kind of points about what it seems to us emerges as what is strong about a very good and excellent youth theatre. And by autonomous, I mean proudly independent. Not subject to any curriculum, not subject to any government scrutiny, not making young people do things that they don't want to do. Being very clear that we are here for you, and it is for us to decide what we want to do in our youth theatre, how we want to govern it, how we want to manage it, how we want to direct it. That's something that we must hold on to. And there is nothing in any of these documents which is about trying to impose any kind of uniform package onto youth theatres. The autonomy of the youth theatre is its greatest strength, I think. And that the best youth theatres are agency-centred. They're about acting. They're about doing things together, both socially and artistically. We don't just put on plays, we manage, we run, we market, we do coffee, we book venues, we contact people. We take responsibility for everything. And we understand that if we don't do something, nothing happens. So that emphasis on doing. And the best youth theatre manage this difficult chemistry between helping you to grow as an individual person, helping you find your voice and helping you develop confidence, but within an ensemble environment, so that your individual personal growth is always in relationship to the community of others that you're working and growing with and supporting and also helping to grow. So managing that individual voice, not cutting out dialogue, not cutting out discussion, encouraging a dissenting voice, keep talking until we found a way forward. Don't block, don't squeeze out, is a characteristic of an excellent youth theatre, it seems to me. As is pursuing the highest artistic standards and production values. Using our professional skills and expertise to make sure that what young people put on stage and the processes by which they make what they put on stage are of the very highest, not high, but highest standards. And in the best youth theatres, there is a conscious, careful, sensitive power sharing. An uncrowning of the power of the leader. A sense of, I don't want to be a teacher, I don't want to be a bully, I don't want to be a coach. I want to find a way for us to live together in this space and to work out how we distribute power amongst ourselves so everybody feels that they have a stake. And of course I will coordinate, of course I will take responsibility for that, but I don't want to be the one that you always look to for things to happen and decisions to be taken. The best youth theatre is representative in its representations. By that I mean that when we see the work that young people do on stage, it's representative of this society in which they live, not just certain aspects of it or certain groups within it, it's representative of us all. And by engaging, I mean that the best youth theatre work draws us in, provides us with pleasure and entertainment as well as reflection and thought. That it's pleasure, it's something that audiences crave as a communication with a highly charged artistic group of young people on stage. It's uniquely youthful, and that play on words is deliberate. It's youthful, but it's full of youth and its aspirations and its hopes and its dreams and its desire to see the world in its own way, not necessarily in the way that its fathers and grandfathers have seen it. It's based on apprenticeship models, so one reason why there are so many of you who are young in this room today is because the youth theatre movement has been extremely successful at reproducing itself. Young people go through the youth theatre movement, they become the next group of leaders, they start passing on responsibilities to younger members of the youth theatre who in turn will become leaders, and that reproduction of leadership within the youth theatre movement, again, I think is one of its really important characteristics. An excellent youth theatre is socially and artistically progressive. It's about being inclusive, it's about breaking those barriers, it's about being innovative, and it's about being transformational. And transformational because the best youth theatres offer us critical hope for a better world. We know that through our own involvement in youth theatre that we change, that we find confidence, that our self-esteem grows, that we have voice, that we are more effective at working and being with other people. But there is also the possibility that through those transformations we might change the world as well. You know, and having that hope for a better world seems to me is no more important thing that you can have in the world in which we live. And finally, that brings us to the notion of the ensemble, which I think, you know, for us, right from the very beginning, has been a kind of bridging metaphor, if you like. You know, our research showed that the majority of young people put taking part in drama productions as their main reason for joining a youth theatre, but they also stressed that the quality of their performances is dependent on other factors. These include a strong sense of collective work, inclusion, and being given mental responsibility for all aspects of the production process. And in that sense, you know, ensemble has become a bridging metaphor between theatre worlds that share this sense of theatre as the art of togetherness. I mean, some of this I've repeated, but these principles of the ensemble were a result. They came out of watching youth theatres, watching Michael's rehearsal room processes, watching very good drama educators and classrooms working, and it just seemed to me that there were these shared principles of work, which were to do with the distribution of leadership and power, absolutely to do with mutual respect amongst players. You can't make quality work unless you respect each other. You know, a shared commitment to truth and not being scared to talk about truth. You know, what is the truth of this situation? What is the truth that we want to communicate to an audience? Always a sense of the intrinsic value of theatre making. That theatre making is important in and of itself. And that shared absorption in dialogue and the process of dialogue and social media making, you know, that kind of being lost in the work, where the work becomes everything and is important. And that's why it gives me very great pleasure that Michael's agreed to be with us today, because, you know, I think he's a man who's done more than most to reclaim the social and artistic importance of the ensemble and its role in theatre. Recently, Michael wrote in The Stage, at the heart of our developing practice at the RSC, there's a set of values and behaviours which we have found are both required and enabled by ensemble working. They are the foundations of our ability to achieve community amongst wildly diverse artists, as well as our creativity. And I think that brings us to, as is often the case with Michael, you know, strong overlaps between the world of professional theatre and the world of youth theatre. And what interests me at the moment is that it seems to me that the differences between youth theatres, when it's a youth theatre that's about you want to be a star where you can be, are often greater than the differences between a youth theatre and the Royal Shakespeare Company, who share the same artistic and social vision for the work that they do. So it's with very great pleasure that I'm going to seek into a conversation with Michael, some questions and answers with Michael to answer. So thank you very much for listening.